All right, so again, thank you all for rejoining me promptly. Talking about again the prisoners' rights movement, which began in 1960s, following a long, extensive period of the hands-off doctrine, where the state began to take a hands-off approach. But now the Supreme Court is beginning to weigh in, and they're like, "No, we got to give these folks some additional rights." And as Savannah has spoke to, these were some of the things that were also championed during the civil rights movement, actually. Oops. Another important case was Wolf versus McDonald. So again, we got two cases so far. What was the first one we talked about? You don't need to look.
It was
Oh,
Walker versus Commonwealth of Virginia.
Good. And then the other, Procunier versus Martinez. Procunier versus Martinez. And make sure you know the rights that were protected in, or the what those cases argue. Commonwealth versus Virginia again said that, hey, you pretty much a slave if you get locked up, dog. Procunier versus Martinez was kind of a response to that, said like, no, you do have some rights. You're not just a slave if you get locked up, dog. And then Wolf versus McDonald is another case. They kind of ushered in. So again, what you're seeing here, and what I need you all to be particularly in tune to as criminal justice majors, is how there's a historical discussion going on. You all are going to have to contribute to this discussion at some point. There might be some laws that are outdated. There might be some things that may have been security threats in 1970 that are not threats anymore. There might be new rights that citizens need to have, that inmates need to have, that reflect how much our technology has changed. Get all this down in detail, and then we'll discuss this case in depth. Again, as always, make sure you're able to tell me what this does. Y'all gonna get a little bit of a quiz at the end of class, all right? So be ready to tell me something. You ain't gotta be perfect, but don't sit up here like we ain't been having this discussion for the better part of an hour, young people. Y'all memory should be a lot better than mine, right? Fantastic. Again, as you take this down, make sure again that you understand and you're processing what you're writing. It's really vital, again, to understand the rationale behind these cases. and what rights they give you. So again, as you continue to get this down, and as you take notes, like one of the things I would strongly discourage you from attempting to do is writing this stuff down word for word. And let me, and as always, all of this is in your book. There's no mystery to it. Even if by some chance you don't get a chance to read it all, like if you just glance at it, sometimes it'll be really helpful and it'll save you some time. Because what I hope our lectures can be, and we got a couple more months where maybe we can get on this track, as opposed to so much writing stuff down. What I want it to be is like us having a discussion where you already got this information, like as opposed to like, and I need y'all to hear me on this. I tell y'all this because I love y'all. That when you're trying to just write stuff down, like you're not gonna, that's not learning. So you need to take time in between class, and the syllabus is stretched out where I give y'all like 2-3 weeks to go through this stuff. So you don't have to sit down and read chapter 8 all at once, but to try and go through these classes and not open up the book at all, you're not doing anything to me, because I know who's who. Don't cheat yourself like that. So I hope, again, as we go forward, you should already be able to see, if you've read this chapter, if you even just open the book, you already know the things we're going to talk about on Wednesday. You'll learn a lot more effectively if you spend a lot more time just kind of focusing in, and we can have a discussion, as opposed to just trying to rush to write everything down. Things that through a month in the class, you haven't been able to remember very well. In Wolf versus McDonald, inmates, again, were given 24 written hour notice. It ruled that an inmate must be given 24-hour written notice of a charge. Keep in mind, we talked about before, right? The prison guards and the warden pretty much had total and complete control over the prison complex and could do anything they wanted. This included planting evidence on people and saying that, hey, we know that you did this crime last night. And it's like, what? Like, hey, don't deny it. We're taking you out right now. So Wolf versus McDonald, it's like, okay, look, you have to be given 24-hour written notice of your charges. People do commit crimes while they're in prison, and they should be held accountable for those. But you should be, again, given 24-hour written notice, not just something made up on the spot. The evidence of wrongdoing must be put in writing. It can't be, okay, well, hey, you know what you did. The inmate has to be, just like in a court of law. If I commit a crime, it is up to the judge, up to the prosecution to prove that I did it, but I also have the constitutional right to present evidence that supports my version of events. I can prove I really wasn't here at this time. I really didn't do this. Prisoners have these same rights. The inmate, again, that sometimes one of the things, if you've taken a juvenile delinquency or any criminal justice class, one of the reasons why I'm so huge about education and I'm so intense about it, and I get so incredibly frustrated when young Black people don't take education more seriously, is that your education level has an impact upon so many things in terms of your navigation through American society. And this is definitely true in terms of criminal justice. The lawyer, the average education level of the average inmate is well below a high school diploma. That's not an accident. There are a great deal of many people who are in prison who literally read at like a 3rd and 4th grade level, without exaggeration. So for a lot of these individuals, oftentimes through no fault of their own, it's not because they weren't smart, it's not because they weren't intelligent. They lived in neighborhoods and went to schools where nobody gave a damn. Again, one of the things that I need you all, again, to stress is that, that by you all having people in your lives that give a damn, that are investing in your future, that is a great luxury that a lot of people don't have. And that can be the difference a lot of times between somebody ended up institutionalized and somebody, going on to Allen University. So a lot of these individuals have been exploited and abused by the system, where they pretty much have no options but to turn to crime, or they have few options but to turn to crime. Then they're in prison, and they're, this, educated prosecutors telling them that they're charged with something, and they have the right to defend themselves or at least articulate that they didn't do it, but sometimes they may not literally have the mental capacity to do that. There was a case a few years back in Virginia where a Black man was accused of rape. They actually got a confession out of him. He ended up getting a death penalty. But he had like a third grade education and was by all accounts mentally retarded. So if you ask him like, hey, are you the president of the United States? He'll say, yeah, I'm the president. So he literally he would volunteer to almost anything. That's the confession that they got from this dude. True story. Later, Latasia came out after DNA evidence became more advanced. It turned out that he did not murder and rape that woman at all. But the state had already taken his life. We use this example because, ideally somebody that may be in that position should have somebody that can articulate their case on their behalf. That if I don't have, and again, for me, Dr. Muhammad, I like to believe I'm pretty intelligent to get my full capabilities, but I'm not no lawyer. So I would need some help in prison. So even again, whether you're somebody that's really educated, somebody with a first grade, education, I'm gonna have to call Professor Rose. Hey, Professor Rose, come read this for me, dog. I don't know what the hell's going on, man. These motherfuckers are tripping. So the Supreme Court says that we now have a right to have these kind of protections, even in prison. Again, there has been some pushback, right? So as more and more cases have given more and more rights to prisoners, politicians, mainly white Republican politicians, just being honest, have come and argued that no, we're giving too many rights. We're making prison too comfy for these people. We want to make it as tough as possible. So Baxter versus Paul Mangiano curved back some of these due process rights. And again, due process, which all our rights are protected in the Constitution. I didn't get to due process yet. And basically, again, when you have the right to all the information is going to be used against you in the court of law, you got a right to hear all that. They can't be deciding nothing in secret. You have the right to defend yourself. You got the right to see who's accusing you of this. All things that are part and parcel of our Constitution. And they're part of our Constitution, Latasia, because the British, when they would rule against the American colonists, they did not give them those rights. The crime control model, again, has come back really hard in the 1980s. And some of these cases kind of illustrate this. Again, don't just take notes on the information. Make sure that you understand. We're going to go back over this in a moment. I expect y'all to be able to tell me something. Okay, several statutes so far can be easy to mix these up. Please study these over the next couple of days. Now, when we talk about this stuff again, Latasia, keep in mind again where we began. When we talk about prisoners' rights, what does this mean? The right to do what? Does this mean legal rights? Does this mean natural rights? There are three perspectives on the category of rights that we should give prisoners: the legalistic view, the crime control view, the humanistic view. The exam is going to be structured in such a way, Latasia, where you're going to see some multiple choice questions, you're going to see some short answers, you're going to see some essay. And essay questions you might be asked might be identify and explain the three traditional views on the rights of inmates. Identify and explain the three traditional views of the rights of inmates. And again, it would not be a bad idea to write down some of these hypothetical questions, as we talked about. The most important things in terms of like the most value to you all in coming to lecture is being able to hear what's heard. I can email this to you all, and for the most part, just the notes in themselves are not going to do you very much good whatsoever. So make sure that you're listening and writing down some of the verbal cues as well. So you might get asked, identify and explain the three views of prisoners' rights that inform how the rights that prisoners should get. There's a legalistic view that says, again, that all the rights that they get in the Constitution, they should get in prison. The crime control view that says, like, look, they've broken the law. We shouldn't be giving them all these rights, man. That, you know, when you break the law, you forfeit all that stuff. Then there's a humanistic view that says, like, look, most of these people gonna come back. That yes, they should be like, you know, they should be held accountable for their wrongdoing. But we don't need to make it so difficult. Like, you know, in fact, not only should we not make it difficult, we need to like do some rehabilitation to make it where they can be better people when they come out. The rights of inmates are informed again by the Constitution. So the rights in particular, and you definitely want to study very closely, Savannah, what do these rights do? The First Amendment, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, and 14th. These are things that you'll definitely be asked if you see them on the midterm or a pop quiz. Our statutes, again, include cases such as Ruffin versus the Commonwealth of Virginia. And what this case did in particular was it made it where essentially you were still a slave of the state. You lost all your right. Again, the right to do what? According to Ruffin versus Commonwealth of Virginia, pretty much the right to do nothing. You're a slave. This view was under the hands-off doctrine, where again the government took very little role in the design, the everyday operation of prisons. They felt like, you know, giving them a right to privacy and they mail and stuff, that's a privilege. You ain't got no right to that. In the 1960s, during the height of the civil rights movement, the hands-off doctrine began to be challenged. Like, wait a minute. These prisons, Latasia, are still in the United States. And as such, they're still American citizens. So they do, again, the freedom to do what? The freedom to do what? You do have the freedom to practice your religion. You do have the right to privacy. You do have a right to have your health care provided. You do have a right to be protected from abuse. So again, these are the particular rights that are argued for amongst the prisoners' rights movement. Wolf versus McConnell again tried to instill more rights, where again, you do have a right, you do have due process rights in prison. Again, the same way, Savannah, if we're going to charge you with a crime, we don't just bring you to court like, okay, well, look, we arrested you and you're going to find out what happened when you get there. Like, no. Again, before you go to trial, you're going to know all the charges brought against you. You ain't finna necessarily get all the evidence, but you're going to get access to that too. The prosecution can't be coming up with no secret witnesses. Again, that'd be on TV like, we have the secret witness. No, God damn it. It's not how the system actually works. They got to share all that information, prosecution and defense attorneys. The crime control model, again, which was, again, a response to the 1960s. So again, the civil rights movement. You got more Black and poor people saying, hey, we want more rights. Politicians is like, screw all that. We're not going to give y'all more rights. For prisoners, you all have broken the law. And by being soft on these cats, by giving them GEDs, by giving them skills training in prison, you give them libraries and stuff, that's making them soft, and that's making it where they're not going to really be deterred. it was recognized though, Latasia, that at this stage in the 1980s, it was impossible to have a totally hands-off doctrine. Again, a hands-off doctrine where the government, federal and state government pretty much played no role at all. So like the prisons, like the prisons in South Carolina today, most of them, who runs them? Who runs the prisons in South Carolina? You might need to unmute yourself.
Would it be the courts?
Say it again, Latasia.
Would it be the courts or no?
Nope. The state politicians, the state government, your elected officials. So your tax dollars go to pay for the South Carolina prisons. With that in mind, it would be unreasonable to say that, again, the government can't, government can't have any say. We just lock people up and whatever y'all want to do, you can do. Although in some ways we're coming back to that. We'll talk about that later on when we talk about private prisons. So it's like, okay, look, we can't just have a totally hands-off doctrine. But Meacham versus Fano is like, okay, we're going to have a restraining hands doctrine, meaning that the government can get involved, but they should limit their involvement. So that's made it where, like again, y'all got to see how all these things are tying in together, right? These are the thinkers. I can get a fourth grader to take these notes and write some stuff down, but come away from this class not understanding. That will make me feel like I haven't done my job very effectively. I'm trying, but I need y'all help with that. So one of the things that we talked about, right, is that under the crime control model in the 1980s, is like, hey, we've been too soft on crime, lock everybody up, 25 to life. That caused a lot of prisons to get overcrowded. So in these prisons and stuff, Latasia, as opposed to like, back in the day, right, it might be 2 people in the room. Now the prisons are overcrowded. What are we going to do? Let's put 5 in the room. Let's put 6 in the room. And the Supreme Court under Rhodes versus Chapman said, that's all good. You could double bunk them. So what if you got 2 Crips in the blood over here? And for the most part, they'll try and separate them, but not always. Again, once these prisons got so crowded, they couldn't really make those accommodations anymore. So again, do you have the right to live in overcrowded conditions because you may have made a mistake? Wilson versus Cedar says to be in violation of constitutional rights, and this is a really tricky one, the prison officials have to show deliberate indifference. So deliberate indifference. So like, look, I know Latasia, was sitting there dying on the floor because she didn't get her diabetes medicine, but I wasn't deliberately indifferent. How do we judge that? This is how, police officers. I know my knee was on George Floyd's neck, and he kept saying he couldn't breathe. I wasn't deliberately trying to kill him. How could I know? And then people be going to court, and people are like, yeah, well, we can't prove he did it deliberately, so we got to let him go. Like what? So keep in mind, right? These politicians, when we talk about police officers and things going on in the prisons, we definitely want to hold the police officers accountable. But you know where all this stuff starts? It starts with the politicians. And in many ways, it starts with the people that put the politicians in office. Because a lot of white people be looking, and a lot of black people, quite frankly, during these times, especially when crack first hit, it sounds good. Let's be tough on crime, lock everybody up. That sounds great. But we need to look at the holistic circumstance of these things. So the politicians have given these folks a lot of power without a lot of accountability. When we begin on Wednesday, again, I told you before, I expect you to look at some of this stuff between classes. I'm going to be very predictable in the things I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to begin Wednesday's class talking about Section 1983 policy. Would anybody like to earn some extra credit points to be able to explain that for me on Wednesday?
I would.
So what you going to do about it?
So Wednesday, you said we're gonna start on the section 1983, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically I'm gonna break it down and tell everybody like basically what it is and how it was used.
What do you think it's related to?
I want to say with certain punishments.
What is his chapter's focus on?
Oh, but basically like the prisoners' rights and everything.
So what do you think that the section 1983 might be focused on?
Certain rights of prisoners.
Good. And then in particular, some of these things we've been talking about throughout. So summarize, anybody, we talked about a lot of things today. Before we go for the day, summarize for me what we learned. I've heard a lot from Savannah. Latasia, let's give it a try. What have we learned today? I didn't expect you to do not read from these notes. We sat here and had a conversation for an hour. So the same way, if I didn't told my girlfriend about my day, I expect her to be able to tell me something. I can't be telling these, if I got to be telling these stories like, 3-4 times, Savannah, and it's time for me to get a new girlfriend. So don't do me like that. My heart breaks very easily. What have you learned today?
We learned about the hands-off doctorate, which it means where the courts and stuff step back and let the people inside the prisons run it. We talked about how we talked about one court case. I forgot, it was something versus Commonwealth Virginia, where he was a slave to the state and all his rights. And then we learned about another one, something versus Martinez, where his privacy, where we said, yeah, he not a slave of the state.
Good. 2 extra credit points, Ms. Richardson. Very good. Now do that again on Wednesday. Again, make sure again you see within that it's 3 views, Latasia. Like some people say, like, look, now they shouldn't get no rights. Other people like, yeah, we should give us rights. Other people are kind of in the middle. Like, look, there are some things that should be legally having to do, but you ain't finna get no jacuzzi in prison, dog. That ain't in the Constitution. The constitutional rights that inform this, and again, we talk about the right to privacy. When we talk about your right to religion, we talk about your right from cruel and unusual punishment. Those are protected in specific amendments. Make sure that you're able to speak to those, okay? And then you talked about statutes that gave people some more rights. Make sure that you're also able to talk about some of the statutes that begin to push some of these rights back. There's people like Ronald Reagan and the Bushes and folks like that, and Newt Gingrich got in office. It's like, look, we got to stop giving these folks all these rights, dog. And we got to put them 8 deep in the cell. So be it. It ain't none of my cousins and people in there, so it's all good. On Wednesday, we're going to talk about Section 1983 and other aspects related to what? Prisoners' rights. Please keep reading. Make sure you know what you're supposed to read and be ready to get some of those extra credit points on Wednesday. I'll see y'all at that time.